You were 24 years old when your cousin Ricardo asks you to store boxes in your garage. He doesn't say what's in the boxes, you don't ask. This is the grammar of the border, the specific language of not asking that people who grow up between two countries learn before they learn anything else. You know what not asking means. You know what the boxes mean. You know what Ricardo means, in the way you've always known what Ricardo means, since you were 9 years old, watching him talk his way out of situations that should have been impossible to talk out of. The boxes stay in your garage for 3 weeks, then they're gone. Ricardo leaves an envelope on your kitchen counter, $2,000. You don't touch it for 4 days. On the 5th day, your truck needs a timing belt, and the mechanic says $800, and you open the envelope. That's the first door. You're not a criminal. You tell yourself this, and you are correct, technically. You stored boxes in a garage. You don't know what was in them. The money was a gift from your cousin. None of this is provable as a crime. None of it would survive a serious prosecutor's scrutiny. You know this because you thought about it for 4 days before you opened the envelope. You are the kind of person who thinks about things for 4 days before opening envelopes. That quality, the thinking, the careful analysis, the specific patience of a man who counts the cost before spending anything, is exactly why they want you. You grew up in Laredo, right on the river, the kind of city where the border isn't a line on a map, it's the texture of everything, the food, the music, the family structure, the specific way people talk about work without specifying what the work is. Your father ran a trucking dispatch business for 19 years, legitimate freight, dry goods, auto parts, manufactured textiles moving north across the bridge. He knew every customs agent by name. He knew which inspectors were careful and which ones were tired and which ones were underpaid. He never crossed the line. You know this with the certainty of a son who watched carefully. But he knew where the line was, and he knew the geography around it. And that knowledge passed to you the way these things pass, not as instruction, not as warning, just as understanding. Your father died when you were 22. Fast, the doctor said, which was supposed to be a comfort. You kept the dispatch business running for 8 months before the contracts dried up and the equipment debt became unmanageable. You sold what you could. You paid what you could. You took a job driving for a logistics company and made $11 an hour and thought about your father's face every time you crossed the bridge. Ricardo came to the funeral. He sat in the front row. He cried in the specific way that men who don't cry in public cry, jaw tight, eyes forward, the grief contained like pressure behind glass. He was your father's nephew. He loved your father. He also, by the time of the funeral, ran distribution to a Sinaloa-affiliated cell operating out of Nuevo Laredo across 4 counties in South Texas. You knew this. You knew it the way you knew everything about the border, not from being told, but from understanding what not asking means. The second door opens 14 months after the boxes. Ricardo calls you at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. He says he needs someone to drive a truck, not your truck, his truck. A refrigerated freight vehicle registered to a shell company in Webb County. The manifest says it's carrying restaurant supply from a distributor in Nuevo Laredo to a warehouse in San Antonio. The manifest is accurate about the restaurant supply. It is not complete about what the restaurant supply is packed around. He says $3,000 for one drive, 8 hours round trip. He says you know the route better than anyone. He says you're careful. He says he trusts you. You say yes, because $3,000 is 3 months of the payment plan on your father's equipment debt, and because Ricardo is not asking you to shoot anyone, or threaten anyone, or understand anything you don't already understand. You drive the truck, you cross the bridge, the customs agent checks the manifest. You've crossed this bridge 700 times. Your face is not the face of someone who is nervous. Your father's dispatch business is in your muscle memory. You answer questions the way your father answered questions, specific, unhurried, with the easy authority of someone who has nothing to hide except the thing that is hidden. The truck clears. You deliver the cargo. You drive back empty. Ricardo puts $3,000 in your hand in a parking lot outside a Home Depot in Laredo at 4 p.m. You go home. You eat dinner. You watch television. You think about your father's face again, but for different reasons this time. The FBI agent's name is Sandra Reyes. She is 36, second-generation Mexican-American, grew up in El Paso, has been with the Bureau for 11 years and the Southwest Border Corruption Task Force for 4. She is not soft, she is not hard. She is the specific kind of precise that comes from spending 4 years watching people make the same calculations you have been making and understanding exactly where those calculations lead. She sits across from you in a room at the Webb County field office on a Tuesday morning 6 weeks after the truck drive. She knows about the truck, she knows about the boxes, she knows about Ricardo. She knows considerably more than you would expect her to know, which tells you something about how long this has been happening before you walked into this room. She doesn't threaten you, she doesn't show you photographs or wave a charging document in your face. She puts a cup of coffee in front of you and she says, "I know you're not Ricardo. I know you're not built for this, and I know you know exactly what you drove across that bridge." Then she says, "The question is what you want to do about it." You drink the coffee, you think for a long time, you ask what cooperation looks like. She tells you. You ask what happens to Ricardo. She doesn't answer that question directly. She says, "What happens to Ricardo depends on Ricardo." You understand that this is the most honest answer she can give you. You understand what it means. You drink the rest of the coffee. You look at the table. You think about your father, who knew where the line was and never crossed it, who drove clean freight across a clean bridge for 19 years, who died with his name intact and his debts unpaid and his hands clean. You pick up your phone. You call the number. You say, "I'm out. Tell me where to go." Here is what cooperation looks like. You continue driving for Ricardo. Not every run, that would be suspicious, and Reyes is careful about not making you appear suddenly indispensable. Occasionally, when Ricardo asks, which he does every 6 to 8 weeks, you drive, you note, the make and model of vehicles in the distribution chain, the names Ricardo uses on calls you can hear, the warehouse locations you deliver to, the faces of the men who receive the cargo, the timing patterns, the bridge crossing shifts that seem to generate less scrutiny. You wear a recording device twice. Both times Reyes spends 2 hours preparing you, what to say, what not to say, how to keep Ricardo talking without appearing to keep him talking, how to answer questions without lying in a way that Ricardo would detect. Ricardo has been doing this for 11 years. He is not stupid. He has survived this long because he reads people the way your father read customs agents, with the specific attention of someone whose life depends on accuracy. The first recording is clean. Operational details, names, a partial route description for a corridor Ricardo is expanding into in Bexar County. Reyes listens to it for an hour. She doesn't tell you what it's worth. She says, "Good work." The second recording goes wrong. Not catastrophically. Ricardo doesn't find the device, but midway through the conversation, Ricardo says something that is not about the operation. He says, "You know what I always respected about your father? He knew what this city was. He didn't pretend. He just chose different." He looks at you and says, "I think about him a lot. I think he would have understood what I'm doing better than most people." You say nothing. You keep your face the way Reyes trained you to keep your face. But something happens in your chest during those 20 seconds that you will not fully process for months. Ricardo loved your father. This is not a performance. You know the difference. And Ricardo, who moves product through 4 counties and employs 32 people and given you money that paid your father's debts, is looking at you with the specific expression of a man who trusts you completely. You go home that night and sit in your kitchen for a long time. You don't call Reyes. You just sit. The thing nobody prepares you for is the information you collect that has nothing to do with Ricardo. In month 7 of your cooperation, you deliver a package, not drugs, documents, to a restaurant supply warehouse in San Antonio. The man who receives it is someone you've seen twice before. On your 3rd visit, you notice something in the office behind him, a photograph on a wall, a man in a law enforcement uniform. The man in the photograph is the same man who processed your customs declaration on 2 of your truck crossings. You tell Reyes.
She goes quiet in a way that is different from her normal quiet. She asks you to describe the photograph in detail. You do. She writes for a long time. She says, "Are you certain?" You say, "Yes." She says, "Don't go back to that warehouse." You say, "Ricardo will ask why." She says, Tell him the contact you usually deal with was hostile. Make something small up. I'll handle the rest. You never find out what she handled. You never find out what happened to the man in the photograph. 3 months later, the warehouse closes. A different distribution point appears in Ricardo's conversation. You report it. This is the part of the work that sits differently than the rest. The truck drives, the recordings, the careful noting of faces and times and routes, those feel like paying a debt, a specific, uncomfortable but comprehensible transaction. But the customs agent is different. He was a person with a job and a salary and probably a family, and you gave his face to a federal task force based on a photograph in an office you should not have been looking at carefully. You don't know what your report did to him. You don't know if it was accurate. You know what you saw. You reported what you saw. You were thorough. You were professional. You think about him sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. Month 11. Ricardo calls you on a Sunday evening. He's not calling about a run. He calls the way family calls, checking in, asking about your truck, asking if you've eaten. He says he's been thinking about expanding the dispatch side of things, legitimate freight. He says your father's name. He says, I want to build something that would make him proud, something clean. He says he wants you to run it. You say you'll think about it. You hang up. You call Reyes immediately. She listens. She says, this is good. She means it as intelligence. Ricardo expanding into legitimate infrastructure is a documented pattern of cartel financial consolidation. She wants to know the timeline, the proposed structure, the names of any investors Ricardo mentions. You give her everything. You are thorough. You are professional. That night you lie awake for a long time, not because of fear, because Ricardo's voice on the phone was not the voice of a man running a criminal enterprise. It was the voice of a man who misses his uncle and wants to build something clean and has, for reasons neither of you chose entirely, ended up on the wrong side of a line your father spent his whole life not crossing. You understand the difference between what Ricardo is and what Ricardo does. You are not sure anymore that the difference is as clear as it seemed in Reyes's office over a cup of coffee 14 months ago. Month 14. The operation moves. Reyes tells you that the task force has enough. The recordings, the route documentation, the warehouse information, the financial connection to a shell company structure that has now been mapped across 3 states. There will be arrests. She doesn't tell you when. She doesn't tell you how many. She says, when it happens, you need to not be in Laredo. You ask about your mother, who lives 4 miles from Ricardo's house and has known Ricardo since he was born. Reyes says, we'll make sure she's protected. You ask what that means specifically. Reyes says, it means we'll monitor the situation and respond to any credible threat. You understand the gap between those 2 answers. You understand that monitored and protected are not the same word, and that Reyes knows this too, and is telling you the truth about what the Bureau can offer, which is not everything you need and is more than you can get anywhere else. You pack what fits in 2 bags, your father's watch, 3 photographs, the dispatch log from the last year your father ran the business, because you have always meant to do something with it, and now you understand that you will not get another chance. You drive north, not to a location Reyes gave you. She gave you a number to call when you arrive somewhere. You drive until Laredo is 4 hours behind you, and then you pull over at a rest stop outside San Antonio, and you sit in your truck for 20 minutes. You think about Ricardo's face at your father's funeral. You think about the customs agent's photograph on the warehouse wall. You think about your mother 4 miles from a house that a man who trusted you completely is about to have his door come off its hinges before dawn. You think about your father, who knew where the line was, who drove clean freight across a clean bridge for 19 years, who died with his name intact and his debts unpaid and his hands clean. You pick up your phone. You call the number. You say, I'm out. Tell me where to go. The witness protection coordinator is a woman named Ellen who has done this for 16 years. She explains your new name, your new city, your new history, which is thin in the specific way that invented histories are thin, Enough to answer questions, not enough to survive scrutiny from someone who knew you before. She says, don't contact anyone from your previous life. She says this the way she has said it hundreds of times. She is not unkind, she is precise. You ask about your mother. Ellen says your mother has been told you are safe. She has not been told where. She has been told not to ask. You ask if she's okay. Ellen says, she's okay. You don't ask anything else. You understand asking more questions will not produce better answers. You're good at understanding when more information is not available. You learned this from Reyes. You learned it before Reyes. You learned it in a city where the grammar of not asking is the first language and the last refuge. You go to the city they give you. You learn the street. You find work. You don't make friends quickly. You are the kind of person who thinks for 4 days before opening envelopes, and you apply that quality to everything now. Every conversation, every face, every new piece of the life they have given you to inhabit. You are careful. You are quiet. You are unremarkable. You are good at this, as it turns out. You always were. Ricardo is sentenced to 22 years. You read it on a news website, a small item, the kind of story that gets 12 hours of regional coverage and then disappears. His name is spelled wrong in one of the reports. You notice this because you notice details. It's the same quality that made you useful to Reyes. It's the same quality that made you useful to Ricardo. It is your most reliable characteristic, and it has served 2 opposing masters with equal precision. 22 years. He'll be 61 when he's eligible for parole. You'll be 47. You don't know if that's the right number. You don't know if there is a right number. You know the names of 3 people who are alive because the corridor Ricardo was expanding into Bexar County never opened. You know the name of a customs agent you may or may not have destroyed. You know that your mother is 4 miles from a house that is now empty, and she is okay, which is the only word Ellen gave you, and the only word you have been able to hold on to. You open your laptop. You look at the dispatch log from your father's last year of business. The columns are in his handwriting: route numbers, load weights, crossing times, the names of the agents who waved him through. 19 years of clean freight in his specific, careful hand. A man who knew where the line was. You close the laptop. You're not sure, sitting here in a city you did not choose, with a name you did not pick, that you know where the line is. You crossed it going one direction and then crossed it going back, and you are on a side now that has a number and a new history and an address that Ellen gave you and no name underneath. But you're out. That's what you told Reyes when you called from the rest stop outside San Antonio. That's all you said. I'm out. You're still not sure what you're out of or what you're in. Somewhere on the southern border right now, a 24-year-old is opening his garage to a cousin he loves. He's not a criminal. He tells himself this, and he is correct technically. He's just storing boxes. He doesn't know what's in them. His cousin trusts him. His father's debts are unpaid. The envelope on the kitchen counter has been sitting there for 3 days. Tomorrow, he'll open it. He doesn't know about the room at the field office. He doesn't know about the cup of coffee or the specific way a federal agent who grew up 2 hours from where he grew up will look at him across a table and say, "I know you're not built for this." He doesn't know the door he's about to walk through locks differently from the inside. He's just a careful person who thinks before he acts. He'll think about this one for 3 days. Then he'll open the envelope. This is a work of fiction, but the FBI's Confidential Informant program is real. The DEA runs over 4,000 active informants at any given time. Cartel infiltration of legitimate border freight infrastructure is documented in federal indictments across Texas, Arizona, and California. The question of what you owe the people you trusted and what you owe yourself does not have a clean answer. Somewhere right now, a man is sitting across from a federal agent deciding whether the number on the table is